Welcome to episode 57 of the XRM Toolcast. In this episode, Scott and I speak with Danish Naglekar, better known as the Power Maverick, about his new tool, Dataverse DevTools, a plugin for VSCode. We walk through how it works, the fun and joy that comes with learning how to build a VSCode extension, PCF Builder, and the exciting world of bearer tokens. Well, maybe it's not exciting, but at least what it allows you to do is exciting. So, sit back and relax, and let's get started. Hello and welcome to another episode of the XRM Toolcast. Me, your host, Daryl, always racing the bar, and Scott, I wear Thunderbird pajamas through. Scott, how's it going?
Very good, thanks, Daryl. How do you know what pajamas I wear?
Where are you? What Alexa can figure out. They make a particular sound when you're rolling around in bed, so yeah.
You stop there now, right?
All right, I'll stop there now. Yeah,
I'm doing really well though. Yeah, I apart from Thunderbird pajamas, I've been doing some plumbing actually. Nothing to do with like base classes or you know, like drag and drop kind of stuff.
Water,
wet flow, as in water flowing, which is probably what's going to happen. Which is because I'm really not very good at plumbing. Plumbing is not my strong point. If I, you know, the fact there's no undo button.
Oh yes, undo's nice.
Yeah, when water starts spewing out everywhere, I would just like to be able to undo things. But yeah, so a new dishwasher is the case in hand. So that's all very exciting.
Yeah, that's usually not. Usually that's just hoses you got to unscrew and screw. That's barely even plumbing. No, there's no existing one, though, right? Is there an existing
exactly.
one?
There's that whole there's kind of the plumbing area where you can put attached hoses and stuff, but it just doesn't work with the new dishwasher. So yeah, lots of excitement there. But I mean, you may ask why we even need a dishwasher. I mean, we're a slave to the machine, right? This is the problem. You know, back in the good old days, it'd be like a mindful exercise doing the washing up. You know, just like taking it easy. But we're a slave to this time-saving devices. So anyway, I'll stop lecturing now on that.
I spent my days on the farm growing up washing dishes by hand, watching Star Trek on a little like Next Generation, on a little like 6-inch like black and white TV radio thing. Like that's what I grew up on, was washing dishes, watching
Sounds
Star Trek.
idyllic. It really does.
It's great.
Yeah.
It was great.
Yeah, you take a bit of time for yourself. Exactly.
It wasn't bad.
Yeah.
It wasn't bad. Well, now that we are about as off topic as we possibly can, we've gone through plumbing, we've gone through Star Trek, and washing the dishes. So it's super exciting. Let's go ahead and introduce our guest and see if we can salvage something with this episode. So we have another return guest, Danish, the Power Maverick, an MVP. He says technology is his passion and travel is his hobby. He is the creator of the PP Dev Weekly and creating tools like the PCF Builder and many others, and author of a book, maybe not the book, but author of a book at the very least, the Power Maverick himself, Danish. Danish, how's it going?
Hi, it's nice to be back on the show, and good to talking to you again.
You continue to be busy with the Power Platform Developer Weekly newsletter, and now you've got a brand new tool that you've just pushed out, and you're looking for feedback and people to help support it. And I'm as new as you could possibly be, because I think besides seeing a few screenshots and seeing a few people comment on the LinkedIn, I know very little about it. So this is like, you get to teach me everything you want the rest of the world to know, because they're all listening. We have the entire rest of the world listening to this podcast. So not to make it nervous for you or anything, but yeah, you are the sole reason for listening.
Yeah. So I was actually, the idea of creating this tool came back when I was creating the content for giving out the TypeScript, like creating a mentorship program for TypeScript, making sure that people can get onboarded from leaving JavaScript behind and getting onboarded with TypeScript. And then I was going through it. I looked at Dataversify from Scott Duro, and I also looked at all other tools, but Visual Studio Code is what we have been using nowadays, because PCF was one of the things that encouraged everyone to start using Visual Studio Code. And I started looked into like Visual Studio Code, what it has to offer. And there's like a lot of configuration. Scott has his own configuration. He has written a blog. Benedict Bergman has his own configuration of TypeScript. And then all the other community members have different type of configuration that they do for the TypeScript. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to generalize, because that's where people get confused. Like if you have different blogs saying different things, and then people might get confused really fast, right? So I wanted to create like a tool which can simplify that process for them to get onboarded with the TypeScript. So I thought like, okay, what's better than Visual Studio Code? Because now everyone is getting onboarded with it, and it is so flexible and it is so easy to use Visual Studio Code. It's so fast, right? It's not like Visual Studio 2020 or 2022, whatever version you're using. It's very heavy, right? Whereas Visual Studio Code is very lightweight and it's free, right? So everyone loves it. And creating extension, because I built the PCF Builder extension, it was pretty easy for me to learn how to create extension, which can enhance the ability for us to get onboarded with TypeScript on Visual Studio Code. So I started looking into it, and then I came up with this idea of creating the tool, which I call Dataverse DevTools.
Okay.
And you can connect to any Dataverse environment. Right now, you can only connect with username and password, but the idea is to expand it and then enable the login pop-up that comes, where you can actually select, you can enter your username, password on the Microsoft login pop-up, and then select your environments and whatnot. So that's the idea. That's going to be in the actual version. So right now the tool is in preview.
Okay.
And that's why it has the limited abilities to do everything that it can do. So that would also resolve most of the connection issues, because you can connect with your username and password. So your MFA authentication and whatnot, that all will get resolved if that is able to, if I'm able to make that happen.
Okay.
And then once you're connected to your Dataverse environment, so your entities loads automatically in the panel, on the left-hand panel, and then the web resources also load in the left-hand panel as well. And then you can look at the connection details. So you can look at what username password you're using. You can actually look at the entity details as well. So like you can get the entity set name, entity object type code, all the other entity metadata that we normally use while coding. So you can actually look at those on the tool itself. So you don't have to go in any other tool outside of Visual Studio Code.
Okay, so let me stop right there. So all you're doing so far, you log in. So first, it took us 5.5 minutes to actually get the name of the tool. So again, you think we'd figure out how to actually introduce these things a little bit better, but so far we're still learning here. So Dataverse DevTools is the name of the tool. Let's start with that. Right. And you did mention that. I didn't even mention it. So thank you very much for doing my job for me. I appreciate it. Maybe we'll need a third co-host. Who knows? So it's a plugin for VS Code. And the first thing that happens is you log in to your environment through the tool. And then it does basically a metadata request and gets all of your entities and all of your all the metadata for your entities, right? And then does it get any other information in that first request or not?
Yeah, it also gets the web resources that are on that particular web resources as well. Only the web resources, only the web resources that are unmanaged, right? Because managed web resources cannot be edited. So just making sure that we are only pulling the web resources that are editable.
Okay, cool. So you pull those all out, and then you can see all your entities, and you can see all the metadata for them, see all their attributes, or we can rewind time and say we can see all your tables, and we can see all your columns, all the metadata for it. But okay, so all right, so I got that there. So and now we're going to dive into, I'm guessing, how we use that and to generate TypeScript or do something with TypeScript to make our world a better place, right? So. Continue. What's the next step? So
yes, So once you have all that thing done, the cool thing about the tool is it also remembers the connection on the workspace. So let's say you opened up a directory and then you connected to, let's say, your dev environment.
Okay.
And let's say it's environment number 1, dev environment number 1, right? Now you open up the same workspace again. The tool will remember that on that particular one, and it would reconnect you without you even having to log in. It silently does that for you. It loads all the metadata, it loads all the entities and web resources without slowing Visual Studio Code down. So you won't even notice it that it's there, but in the status bar, it shows you which environment you're already connected to.
Okay. And I'm assuming that allows you to refresh your metadata as well and all that kind of fun stuff.
Right.
It kind of sounds like all that connection management. It kind of sounds like the XRM toolbox. What that's doing, it's managing connections and. So in a sense, what you've done there is you've sort of started to pave that way to be able to have tools loaded into VS Code. I mean, is that
right?
Is that something you're thinking about? Having the ability to just say, okay, well, here's the connection management for VS Code, and then having sort of the ability to sort of plug in different things and piggyback on the back of that authentication management.
Well, that's a good idea, Scott. I was not thinking that route, but yeah, that is something interesting, and we can go that route at some point. But now my focus was only to make things easier for TypeScript focused, and then expand upon it, like using plugins and whatnot. So there is going to be additional tools or additional functionality is going to be added to the tool in future. But right now, I was just going to start with the TypeScript one and then see where it goes.
Okay, awesome. So what does TypeScript come into this? So far, we've just got the metadata, we've got stuff loaded and that kind of stuff. So continue our journey through this tool.
So once you open up your Visual Studio Code and the browser, and you have done all the connection pieces, then you right-click your Explorer. In your Explorer in Visual Studio Code, you can right-click and then say create Dataverse TypeScript project. And it would just create the project for you with all the configuration built into it. So it would have the tsconfig, proper tsconfig loaded in the project. It would have the folder structure. So it would have the source folder. It would have the web resources folder. And then it would also have where the output directory should be in the TypeScript, where your TypeScript should be written, where your JavaScript should be created, how should the map file be created. All those kind of nitty-gritties of TypeScripts are all built into that project. And it also is integrated with the typings, XRM typings as well. So it's already loading the XRM typing NPM package along with it. So once you have the TypeScript project, then the main part comes writing the TypeScript, right? So now you start with the TypeScript. But whenever you start with the TypeScript, you need to also load the entity specific typings for it. And right now, what you do is you either do it manually or you have some tools. I've seen some tools on XRM Toolbox, but actually none of them suited me because they generate the entire one single file, like how CRM SVC util had to do. It generates a big file and it becomes very clunky and very hard to manage. And even if you add one single attribute, now you have to update the entire file, which sounds ridiculous to me. So now, once you have the TypeScript project and once you have now you can actually create a folder called typings, and then you go to the tool again and you go to the entities and you right click the entities. That would give you the option to create the typing for a specific entity. So each entity specific file is created as a typing file, right? So if you right click on accounts and then say create a typing for accounts, then account typing will be created. So account.d.ts file will be created. So declaration file will be created. And then
is this the web API typings then? Like what are these typings for? Like they're not form typings, they're web API.
So these are form typings, not web API typings. So I wanted to include web API typings.
All right, so it generates all the typings for your form?
Yes. So it gives you all the attribute. Okay. So like if you're using, because I've integrated it with XRM typings, right? So if you write XRM of XRM.get attribute, XRM.page.get attributes, as soon as you do get attributes, you would get a list of all the attributes only for account form. So when you're creating the form context, so your form context needs to be typecasted into accounts. So I'm creating this xrm.account. So if you're creating a typing for account, then you will also get an object called xrm.accounts. So when you're creating this form context, you typecast your form context as xrm.account. And then once you use that form context, so say you do form context.get attributes, then the get attributes will give you an IntelliSense of list of all the attributes only specific to accounts. It will not give you context. It will not give you any other entity.
The attributes of that form?
It's not forms.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not form specific yet because I wanted to keep it generic.
You're saying this is you're not using the delegate as XORM definitely typed. You're using the XORM typed definitions from the definitely typed library, right?
Yeah, I'm not using that because that I wanted to use it. Actually connected with Magnus on it. Magnus drove me through the entire project, how it's working and whatnot. But I had difficulties integrating it with the tool because of some of the prerequisites that it needed.
Okay.
So I wasn't able to do it. But at some point I might look into it again.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. But this is using the one that's on the definitely typed GitHub project.
Right.
That's the typings you're using.
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
Just making sure that those were the typings for it.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So you're generating typings for those entities.
Yeah.
Okay.
Once you have the typings, then you can use those typings to create your TypeScript files, TypeScript class files. Once you have the TypeScript class files, you build a project, and the project build will generate the JavaScript files in its own web resource folder with the map files and whatnot. And then comes the web resource uploading piece, right? So now once we are done with the typings, now web resource upload, you right click the JavaScript file, and it would only, like, if you right click a TypeScript file, you won't see an option to upload it to Dataverse. It only appears when your file type is JavaScript file, obviously, right?
Okay.
And then once you right click your JavaScript file, upload it, then it would, if you have not already uploaded the same file previously, then it will ask you for certain options, like if you want to connect it to an existing web resource, or if you want to upload it as a new web resource. You would be guided through a series of questions, and then you would be asked what the file name should be, what the file display name should be, things like that. And it just gets uploaded into, and it would also ask you for a solution. So it would add that file in a specific solution. Now, once you have uploaded a file, it would not ask you for, like, second time if you're uploading the same file again, it would not ask you for the same questions, because now the tool would know that that specific file was connected to which web resource in Dataverse, and it would just automatically upload it to that same one.
Okay, so it doesn't actually follow the structure then of your web resource. You define this file goes here, this file goes here, this file goes here, but your structure locally within that you would check in doesn't have to match at all the structure that is in Dataverse.
Yeah, so that's another enhancement that I'm going to do in
you got a mapping file.
Yeah, I have a mapping file, yeah. But then that's again an enhancement that I'm going to do. It's going to map, like it's going to at least prompt a user to utilize the same structure that they have in the project, but then they should have the ability to change it. So that's where I'm trying to make it more as flexible as we can.
And that map file, presumably that sits in the project folder, is it? So that you can then check that into source code, and then someone else brings it out, and then they can do it.
Right.
Is that like a JSON file? Is it, or is it? What's the mapping file that it uses?
That's an XML file. Yeah.
Great. Cool. Yeah. And it put it at the root of.
That almost hurts.
Yeah. XML.
Whoa, after doing all this JavaScript stuff, XML. Why not JSON? Why not JSON?
Yeah. Yeah.
Did it put it at the root of the folder? Where does it put that file?
Yes, it's put at the root of the folder, and it's called dv-dt linker file. So it's called Dataverse DevTools linker.xml. Yeah.
Cool. Excellent. Sounds good. And does it? So you've got a JavaScript file that you're uploading, obviously. Is there sort of in the project that you're using? Because as if I understand what you're saying, is that when you create a new project, it kind of creates all the boilerplate project setup for you. Like I said, it creates a TS config. Does it use Webpack or anything like that to do bundling? What's the configuration that it uses?
Yeah, so I tried to use Webpack, but then I ran into some of the roadblocks with Webpack. Which I don't remember exactly what those were. And then I actually asked Benedict what he did to resolve it. And it seems like right now, for every file that you put as a TypeScript file in the Webpack config, you have to put it as the source. So each file has to be mentioned in the source. That's what he said. And I couldn't find a way to make that happen, like in a generic way, like take all the TypeScript files from source directory and then compile it and then put it in the web resource directory. So I couldn't find a way to do that. And I'm still experimenting with it and see if I can make that happen.
Because Webpack works in a kind of a tree shaking way. So you give it like an entry point, so like index.ts, and then it goes and works out all the different files that it needs for that to compile all those resources, and then it goes and compiles those and puts those into a single output file. Obviously, you can create multiple outputs if you've got multiple entry points. But that's the way that Webpack works, is that you have to give it an entry point. So you don't have to mention all the files. You just have to say, start walking the tree here. And then it goes and explores and finds all the imports that you've created in order to do that. But I think Webpack is now fast becoming the sort of the de facto way of bundling, because the great thing is that you could import using npm. You can have other libraries that you can bring in and automatically bundle and minify it and optimize it for production and things like that. So I think that would be a really good thing to include. Yeah,
but then if you have one entry point, it only generates one output as well, right? It doesn't split it up. Like if you have, let's say, account form.ts and contact form.ts, my entry point, let's say I put it as, and there's an index file as well over there, but then it won't generate account and contact JS files, right? It would just generate one index file for us.
Yeah, you can configure it to output multiple bundles. Each of those bundles will link to a single entry point. So it doesn't output JavaScript files linked to the TypeScript files. It outputs JavaScript based on the entry points you give it. So, it's not like a one-to-one. If you're just going to create a one-to-one JavaScript to TypeScript, then you've got there's no bundling, right? It's just that's just a TS config, TSC compilation.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Maybe I can pick your brain at some point.
And that's fine for simple stuff, right? If you're not using any external libraries. And this is always the challenge, right? And I think that's where tools like you're describing really can help here, is that there's always these complexities that people don't necessarily know about when they're first starting out. Because if you're just going to write a simple JavaScript using TypeScript, like on change events and on load events and stuff like that, and you don't need any external libraries to package in and bundle, then you don't need any bundling. There's no point in using Webpack. But obviously, as soon as you get into that point where you need to bring in third-party libraries and optimize for production builds and all those sort of things, that's when you start to need a bundler.
Yeah. And that's why I wanted to keep it simple initially. But yeah, obviously, I wanted to include Webpack at some point. But I'm also assuming that if we even go that route of adding Webpack to the template, but then we should have the ability where people can just choose whether they want Webpack or not when getting the boilerplate template, because we don't want them to get overwhelmed with all the Webpack things that they would be getting with the boilerplate.
Yeah, definitely. I guess this time along, it was probably easier for you to create the VS Code extension because of your experience from the first time around.
Yes.
Was there anything that you kind of learned when you built the PCF Builder VS Code extension that you you changed the way that you did it the second time? I mean, I've never ever built a VS Code extension, so maybe you could just give us a quick rundown on even how you even do it, because I'd be interested in hearing that.
And actually, whatever I had done for PCF Builder, I did not use any of that stuff, because this is totally different, because it has a tree view structure and it has a panel, which PCF Builder did not have. PCF Builder was pretty simple, straightforward, and it was pretty easy to get started with PCF Builder because it only had certain commands. You open the command palette and then you run those commands, and then that's all included in the Power Platform CLI, right? So you don't need to do anything with it. The only thing that I did intensely with the PCF Builder extension was loading the test harness locally. So the test harness is not executed by npm run command or the start watch command. It's actually run by just bundling the Webpack config and then running it locally within the Visual Studio Code itself. So that's only interesting thing that I did with it. So recently, one of my colleague was having issues when he was running npm run start, because somehow the client was blocking some of the requests that were going out, and he was not able to run that command. So I told him that, hey, use my extension and just use the play functionality for PCF Builder, and it would just render, because it's not doing the npm run run start command, right? So that was the only nitty-gritty of that PCF Builder. But this one was really intense in building, because I used a lot of tree panel, a lot of views, and I've tried to utilize as much features as the Visual Studio Code extension API provides, and then I've tried to utilize everything in it.
So does it give you controls like HTML controls for tree views and things as part of the SDK, or do you have to build all of the UI, from the ground up?
No, the API gives you most of the stuff. So you have to provide the data, obviously, but then which data, how it needs to be aligned in tree-wise, which data is parent of which, or which data has what kind of childs in it, and then you provide the icons for each one of that, and that's all about in the tree view. The view panel is pretty simple because it's all HTML, so you design your own HTML and then just try to render it in Visual Studio Code.
Yeah, cool. So we're using like a UI library there, like Fluent or something like that. How are you building that? No,
so I've kept it simple. I think I've tried to use Bootstrap. Just keep it simple for the UI, but the UI is pretty straightforward. I don't think so it needed a Fluent UI control on it or anything. But if it gets more complicated, then maybe we can try to add it in future.
Cool. So would you say it's easy to get writing VS Code extensions, or did you need all of that experience that you did the first time around?
Yeah, the first time around, the experience was really needed, because the documentation lacks a lot. It doesn't provide you with any examples. It just gives you these methods and then the description of the method, and then it just asks you to go figure it out yourself. That's it. So I had to do a lot of trials and error, and it took me months. I was working on this for maybe a month or so before I released it.
Well done for getting it going. It looks really nice. I mean, it looks as though it's just like any other VS Code extension. So you've obviously worked it out pretty well, I'd say.
Yeah, I tried to.
So what are the next things you're wanting to do with it? Are you wanting to, what are the next additions you're wanting to make to the tool?
Yeah, so there's a lot of things that I've planned. Just have to find time. One is to integrate with Dataversify as well, because I've seen it's so amazing that Dataversify, it would simplify the life of every developer. But then most of the people don't actually know. So once they download the tool, if it's integrated with it, then it would make things easier for them to use it. Second is, as I said in the beginning, improving the connection. So right now it's only using username and password. So giving them the ability to have if you have the MFA enabled or whatnot, you would still be able to connect to the tool. And then there are other stuff planned as well, which I think are, let me see.
I saw in your blog post you had like a list of to-dos there.
Yes. Which is... That's why I kept it, because now I can just go on it and look, hey, have I done this or not? Right.
Yeah.
And the major thing that I want to do is also put in the web resource uploader. The web resource uploader right now is very basic. So what I want to do is I want to make a web resource uploader where you can bulk upload. And this was the idea that Magnus also had. So Magnus said, hey, we have so many tools, but none of them actually has figured out a way to bulk upload. Like if you have the mapping, right? That's why I created the mapping file. So now I have the mapping. So if you can just bulk select the web resources and then upload. And then Visual Studio actually also provide you a way to identify if there was a change to a file, if it is connected to a Git, right? So if the file was changed, so maybe the files that were changed, it will automatically pop up and then say, hey, these are all the files, do you want to upload, right? Things like that. So simplify uploading of the web resources is also one of the thing in the list. But yeah, I'm also looking for contributions, and that's why I've written a nice contribution guidelines explaining each and every file, what it does, why it was created, what's the purpose of it, so that because it would be easier for people to just read and then say, hey, these are all the class files that we have, and they don't have to worry about all the other Visual Studio code, extension, API things. They just worry about the code and then just add that code somewhere. And then I've created a lot of helper classes to make things easier to extend the tool when you're contributing as well.
That's cool. So for the authentication, are you storing like a bearer token with a refresh token?
Yes.
When you've authenticated?
Yeah.
So as long as any tool could be integrated into it, as long as it accepts that bearer token, refresh token, I'm guessing.
Mm-hmm. But I'm only authenticating via that resource, Dataverse URL, right? So when you say you're only creating tool for Dataverse, then yes, you can certainly do that, but not with Azure or not with graphs or anything else.
So you've got a token basically that is okay for that resource, the Dataverse URL resource,
right?
And yeah, so it's kind of once you've got that robust and working, and you've got like some way of doing it, then suddenly, you could accept contributions of anything that's, as long as you've got that bearer token, all of the hard work in a sense has kind of been done, right? Because that's the tricky bit, doing authentication. Like Dataverse hosts a local instance of Electron, so it can do the OAuth pop-up. It does it purely in Node.js. It doesn't use any other. It doesn't use C#. It doesn't use the Microsoft SDKs. But ultimately, all you get is a bearer token at the end of the day. So it doesn't matter which way you authenticate, as long as you got a bearer token. Then So if any of our listeners have got an idea for how to of things they want to put into VS Code, then get in touch with Danish, because it's ready and waiting. It's like an XRM toolbox of VS Code. It's awesome.
Yeah, exactly. Love it.
Very exciting.
Scott, does Sparkle XRM, does that upload web resources in bulk? Like upload all your web resources or not?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. So I mean, because that's delivered by NuGet, right? So I think that's the fundamental difference here, is that the Sparkle uses NuGet to distribute it, and it will do bulk upload of web resources, but it also does plugins and all of those kind of, does unpacking and packing. But this is a cross-platform thing, because if it's VS Code, it's going to run on a Mac as well. So that's another. Whereas Sparkle will only run on a Windows. It's using the .NET framework, so it's not using .NET Core or anything like that.
Yeah.
All right.
But someone just pointed out that the extension doesn't work on Mac OS, so I also have to look into that issue as well. And that's why the preview release, right? Because I didn't test it with Mac OS or any other versions of VS Code, because if you have a lower version, higher version, all those kind of tricky things, I've not tested with everything. That's why I released it in a preview mode. Let's see how people react, and if it really goes, like if people really like it, and if I see there's a people want it, then I can add more features to the tool and start improving it.
Cool. And you mentioned you were going to integrate with Dataversify as well, because your question, Daryl, earlier about like the web API, because that's what Dataversify does. It creates early bound types for the web API. And in a way that actually means that it works exactly the same as the sort of the server side, the IO organization service. So you don't have to worry about all the web API and underscores and all of that kind of confusing stuff. You use the logical names, which seems like an obvious thing, really, but when you use the web API, you suddenly realize that it's not.
Stop making it easy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
And that's why I wanted to integrate with Dataversify, because the web API calls, it just makes it easier, right? And that would just make life more easy when you're dealing with like the form attribute is taken care of, right? Now we need to worry about the web API piece of it as well. So integrate, and that's why I planned on integrating with Dataverse, and that's why I wanted to connect with you, Scott.
Yeah, cool. Sounds exciting.
Yeah.
So are you using it so far on your own projects then, Danish? Are you kind of, is that what you're planning to do, is to kind of, I think dog fooding is the phrase, right? Which is always seems a bit disgusting, really.
No, yeah. I'm using it on my project, and soon. Right now, the time is not right for me. A lot of projects going on, but as soon as I'm freed from those projects, my plan is to have a session, that TypeScript session for folks one-on-one, not one-on-one, but in group, a smaller group. I know you have a course as well on TypeScript, which is really great. But I wanted to give that personal attention so that people can ask questions then and there itself. I had done this last year as well and the year before that, but that was for PCF. So I wanted to do it for the data for TypeScript as well. And then that's where I wanted to first build this tool so that it would make their life easier to get onboarded with TypeScript.
That sounds like an awesome, amazing opportunity. You're probably going to get hundreds of people clamoring at your door doing it.
Yeah, I'm probably going to limit it. Yeah.
The thing with TypeScript is you never quite feel like you've arrived there. At least I haven't, right? Like it's like, if I sit in any time I go to like a course of any sort, like I always seem to pick up something that I had no idea was there, or something like, oh, I should be doing it this way, or something like that. So, yeah, it seems like that'll always be there. I mean, that's actually one of my presentations for the CRM Summit is TypeScripting the heck out of your project, I think is what it is. So yeah, that's always confusing.
Yeah, but that's what it is, right? I mean, yeah, you never stop learning. I mean, every time, even for me as well, like we keep on learning every day, right? Even TypeScript, C#, you have reached there, but you don't, because there's something else out there, and something new always comes out. So,
well, I was about to ask, Daryl, have you reached that kind of point of enlightenment with C#? Have you reached that point where you're like, you know what? There is nothing more for me to learn. I know.
Nowhere close. But at the same point in time, I feel like the things that I picked up on TypeScript are much more. They feel bigger. If that makes sense. Like, there's other things that, I didn't know that this, but it doesn't feel as big or as changing, and it's not moving as fast, really. I mean, TypeScript is so different now than it was 4 years ago, where C# has changed very little compared to that between now and 4 years ago. Now the whole like .NET Core and all that kind of fun stuff is completely different, but I mean, the actual code itself hasn't changed as much.
That's what makes it exciting, right? We work in this industry because it's constantly changing, and like you say, Danish, there's always every day's a school day. I mean, and that's what's so cool about it. It's like
I went and one MVP summit. I went to listen to the TypeScript side of the fence. So I left the CRM world, went over the TypeScript world just to see what they talk about. It's like it's weird to try to tell you things that are coming up when everything we do is open source and out in the open already. So it's like, everything that's out there. We're already there. So it was kind of a funny moment. So that's the great team at Microsoft with Anders Haugsberg going through and kind of leading that charge. So yeah, it's great. Great. So Danish, anything else that we need to cover in this? I'm sure we'll share the links to go to check it out, to download it, to play with it, and to give feedback, and to go through and assist in having additional documentation. But anything else that we need to talk? Oh, one thing I was going to ask. There are 1,000,001 ways to configure TypeScript. Like config settings.
Right.
Are you like more permissive or more non-permissive when it comes to how you set that up? Like, are you enforcing that you need to declare every single method at the type, or how did you set that up? Because that's always like the biggest thing with me. It's like, naming things is hard. Like configuring your TS config is hard. Like you're like, which way do I want to do it? What do I want to enforce? So what how opinionated were you, and what did you decide to do with that?
Yeah, so I went with the neutral way. So as much as I can, so like strict, obviously use strict, right? But then naming like camel cases or Pascal cases, that I've not limited to that. But then I'm also intending to add ESLint and prettier in as part of the boilerplate template itself. So ESLint does it for you. So the ESLint config will actually drive the camel casing and Pascal casing and whatnot. So that is not enforced with tsconfig, but ESLint is a nice way where it actually prompts you and not just stops you from doing things, right? So that's a really nice thing that I want to do. But yeah, in terms of tsconfig configuration, I've kept it pretty straightforward. Actually forgot what I have added in there. I did a lot of permutations and combinations. So yeah, there's not much in the TypeScript. I've put in the comments for what all things you can turn on and turn off. So you can certainly look at that, but I've not enabled any of those features in the tsconfig.
So you kind of, you pick one and you let them go through and actually, if they, you at least comment it, hey, you could turn this on, rather than just having nothing there.
Right.
You're like, hey, this is false. You can turn it to true, or you can set this to whatever you want to set it to, or picking the type of JavaScript you want to actually compile to. That's kind of a big deal. Like, what do you want to compile to? Like, it makes a difference in the way you're outputted.
Yeah, so I went with CommonJS with ES6 right now. That's what I've done. Some people change it. They want some other compiling mechanism. But yeah, you can change it if you want to, because I'm not loading the TypeScript files for you, right? So you can certainly change the tsconfig if you're familiar with it. But that's what the boilerplate gives you, CommonJS with...
Do you have any testing in your boilerplate?
That's another thing that I want to add, for sure. But creating testing is something, always...
It's...
For some reason, I always am hesitant. Even though I've attended so many seminars on unit testing, I've seen so many things on unit testing, how to do it. I'm really hesitant to go that route yet, but let's see. Maybe this tool will change my perspective on it, or change my mindset.
My free course on TypeScript goes through a lot of the testing side of things, unit testing, and actually that's another thing that Dataversify does, is it allows you to create unit tests or more importantly integration tests against the web API, but running inside VSCode. So it allows you to step through your code actually connecting to the Dataverse web API, which I just find so useful. That the testing when you can actually connect to Dataverse rather than just a mocked version, actually being able to step through and seeing what actually happens against Dataverse, I find really useful. So I think it's definitely something that perhaps when you look at the Dataversify integration, you might consider looking at.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I've only set up unit testing like on JavaScript, like on 3 projects, and each project, like it was like in 3 years later, and so it felt like a month to set up the project. I'm like, I consider myself fairly well versed on doing that kind of stuff, and so if it's taking me this long, how long is it taking someone that's not touched this at all? Like, and so I understand that, like, I don't think I have the time devoted to get that up and running. Like, I understand that feeling and that fear, but if it's in Scott's free webcast stuff, I need to go back and rewatch that and find that spot and see if A, I'm doing it right, because if I'm not doing it like Scott, it's probably not right, and B, to refine some things, because I'm sure there's some things that could go a little bit better than what I'm actually doing. So
it's all in there. We'll put a link to it in the podcast notes.
All right.
Yeah. Cool. And that's why I wanted to integrate with Dataversify as well. So Scott, I need your help on that. So I'm going to reach out to you. Please attend my calls. Don't put me on mute. Right? Danish calling, please put him on mute. Because I have bugged him a lot. Like during writing the book, I used to ping him a lot. So yeah.
Was the book. You probably should say what the book is. We said a book, but what is the book that you've written?
It's the awesome book. It's the best book.
It's the only book on PCF.
Book. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, no,
Awesome.
it's a great resource, the Danish's book on PCF. The thing about even though PCF is constantly changing, the book, there's stuff in there for even if you've been doing PCF stuff for a while. There's always stuff in there, I think, that you'd be able to get some value from. So yeah, highly recommended.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm actually working on my first kind of PCF, like real life PCF control. My only one I did before was a web resource, like an iframe. That was it. Like you just give it a URL and that was it. So I mean, there wasn't really anything in it. But now I'm taking Andrew Batinko's two of his PCF controls and trying to merge them into one. So he has like an composite address control and a search address control, and I want to have the search with the composite. And so I'm having to kind of figure out how do I Frankenstein these things together to get it to work. And I'm learning a whole lot. It's just taking a while. So, but
nice.
yeah, I guess that happens sometimes. So I should reach out to Danish when I have those questions. Hey, why? How is this working? How is this supposed to be working? Because I feel like this is not. I'm doing it wrong. It feels like, or this isn't what I feel like I should be doing. So yeah, it's always good to have resources. So.
Yep.
Well, Danish, I gotta say I'm looking forward to where you're going to go with this. I'm looking forward to getting that power in more people's hands. Like, even if I'm kind of stuck in my ways, like Jonas and I always used to kind of joke about, he does late bound because he's stuck in his way of doing tools, and I do early bound because I'm stuck with my way of doing tools. And, I don't think we're ever going to, we're not going to ever change sides. So even if I don't ever come to the point where I jump in and start using it, I'm excited for everyone else to start using it, because the more that I see those things in the wild, the easier my life is when I come into a project. I'm like, oh, you're using this? Well, great. Well, let's just, I'll figure out whatever it is I need to figure out with that. And we'll continue using it. At least you started with that, rather than being at, completely ground zero, no idea what anything is, or, I've seen, there's plenty of things I think we've all seen of what the heck's going on, no idea what's going on, and trying to live through that is, could be more fun, I guess I could say. So, yeah.
It's a good habit to get into, is looking at code that you've got no idea of what's going on. I make that a habit of mine every week. I was like, I make a conscious effort to go and find some code that I've got no idea what's going on, and look through it and just go, what? And try and figure something out. It's really good practice. Highly recommended.
Yeah.
You're good. Yeah.
But I'm gonna add plugin support as well. So maybe at some point, Daryl, you wanna jump in as well, and maybe put unit testing framework in it.
Plugin support.
For plugins,
like
yes,
C# plugin.
That's
support?
the idea. Yep.
Okay.
C# plugin support.
All right.
Yeah. I want to make this tool everything. Like your go-to tool is what my idea is. But then that's where I need contributions from the community.
Yeah. Yeah. That's always the catch-21, or it's. No one's going to put it in there if there's something that's in there, but then if there's something that's in there, no one's going to put anything in there, and so that's kind of the hard way to get that.
Well, what's catch-21? Is that catch-21?
Catch-22. Catch-22. Sorry, I don't know. Catch-21 is what you do when you don't have enough money for catch-22. You just get the catch-21.
There's a whole backstory we could create around that, and it could suddenly catch on. People start saying, "Oh yeah, that's catch-21, right?" Yes. Yes. It'll be all traced back to that point where you just said it.
Yeah. Maybe you should change the title of your book to Catch-21 rather than PCF. What is the name? PCF what?
It's called Extending Microsoft Power Apps with Power Apps Component Framework.
Okay. All right. Very technical sounding title. Unlike my thing I did today for Dynamics Con, which was all your plugin base are belong to us. That's just kind of fun.
Yeah, but remember, I actually sent a poll, and then you actually voted for this name as well.
Of course, I would. I like this thing.
Yeah.
But Catch-21 wasn't on the list of options though, so
because I just came up with it. It took me a while to get to that level of brilliance. Anyway,
next level brilliance.
Well, Danish, thanks for coming on. Thanks for talking about your tool, and I hope this is at least helpful for getting the word out, and I hope others will join in and think, oh, I've got an idea to add this, or I've got an idea to add that, and heck, even the early bound generator. I mean, beside the UI is one thing, but all that does is generate a config file and a command line. So there's not a whole lot of work that would be involved to to port that over to anything you wanted to port it to. In fact, I already have NuGet files for that. So you're always welcome to, if you ever want to do some C# early bound generation, you can start from there. You don't have to start from scratch is what I'm saying. So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yep. Thank you for having me.
All right. Well, I will talk to the two of you later. It was great having you, Danish. And yeah.
Yeah. It's been great chatting to you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Bye, guys.
Yes.
This has been the Xterm Toolcast with Jonas Rapp and Daryl Labar. If you have any questions for Jonas or I, or suggestions for future episodes, please send them to cast@xtermtoolbox.com or tweet to xtermtoolcast.